Hello, folks. Welcome back to the AA Big Book Stories. I'm your host, Jason. And today's video, of course, is brought to you by my boys down at the vape shop. James 414 Vape Sales. That's James 414 Vape Sales. They're out of Mount Vernon, Kentucky. They have a Facebook page and a regular internet site. They're on the way to Somerset. If you guys are through there needing some vape or some vape juice or all accessories, they have a little bit of everything. My homeboy JR runs the outfit personally. With that, let's just jump into it. Today, we're on story number 8 of part 3 of the stories in the back of the big book, Alcoholics Anonymous. A vision of recovery. A feeble prayer forged a lasting connection with a higher power for this Micmac Indian. I thought I was different because I am an Indian. I heard that statement from many natives at my early AA meetings. I would only shrug and say to myself, if you think you're different, what about me? I'm a red-headed Indian. I grew up on a reservation in Canada as a young fellow. I was a proud Micmac Indian. My family had a reputation. They were hard drinkers, violent, and tough, and I was proud of this. I was told my grandfather had been a chief of our band, but he had to step down because he went to jail for shooting a man. Jail was almost a badge of honor in my family, or so it seemed to me. As a small boy, I remember standing atop a case of beer, there was always lots around the house, saying to myself, in a few years, I will be this tall. There were times, though, when I witnessed my father's rages and I was full of fear. I swore that I would not be like him, but I did not see that alcohol and the rages were related. I always thought myself different on many occasions. I wished I had black hair like my friends. Micmac was the language of our home, but I would not speak it. All of my family spoke Micmac, but when they spoke to me, I would answer them in English. I believed I couldn't speak Micmac as well as my parents, so I resolved not to speak it at all. I was 10 years old when I had my first drink of alcohol on New Year's Eve. I stole 2 glasses of vodka from my parents. I couldn't say that it did what it was supposed to do, for I got deathly sick, threw up, and had diarrhea. The next day, I was full of fear that my parents would find out. I learned my lesson for a while. A few years later, in junior high school, a few friends and I got a bottle of rum from the bootlegger. I got really drunk, and it was great. I remember having a feeling of complete freedom. I drank for the next 15 years. Drinking became a major part of my life, and I thought it was normal. Then came the violence and fighting, the illegal acts, and the image of a tough guy. My family was proud of me, and some relatives would actually encourage me. I spent a number of years in and out of juvenile hall, correctional facilities, and after my 18th birthday, I began spending time in county jail. I actually got high when I came home, knowing that my friends and relatives would respect me more because I had been to jail and was becoming a man. While in a juvenile detention center about 500 miles from home, I received word that my mother was dying of cancer. I was able to get a pass and returned home to spend some time with her. One evening, my family asked me if I would stay home with my mother and give her her medicine she required to take. I had already had a few drinks and was anxious to get out and party with my friends, but I reluctantly agreed to stay. Self-pity set in, and all I could think of was the good time I could have been having. I got very impatient with my mother when she refused to take her medication. I almost forced it into her mouth. Then I left to join my friends. The next morning I woke up in the county jail 100 miles from home. I had attempted to break and entering and was caught by the police. That very evening, as I sat in jail, my mother died. I was allowed out for the funeral, but I still recall how alone I felt even when I was with my family. I felt shame and remorse for the years to come. I believe somehow I was responsible for my mother's death. The incident haunted me for years. Alcohol would take it away for a while, but the remorse always returned. I tried to comfort myself by saying that my lifestyle was a part of my destiny, just like many of my family members, but this did not remove the remorse. I can remember only one good thing that happened during this time. As my mother lay dying, I talked to her in the Micmac language. She seemed so happy, and she told me that it sounded beautiful to hear me speaking Micmac. I cherish this memory. I was to meet a young girl and have a son. Proud, I named him after myself, and my drinking slowed down for a little while. One day I promised my son that tomorrow I would take him to the movies. I really meant it from the bottom of my heart, and I was looking forward to it. That night I took a drink, and it led to many more. The next day I was hungover, and even though I had promised to go to the movies that afternoon, I took a drink to fix myself up. That drink, followed by many more, and then I justified them by telling myself, my son is young and he will never remember the movie. The day after the promised movie, I was guilty and remorseful and felt I was just no good. I faced my son only to hear him talking excitingly about going to a movie. I couldn't say anything, for the movie was no longer playing. I left his mother to explain. The next few years saw me living back in the old home with my father, as my girl had left me, taking my son. My drinking escalated even more, as did my guilt, remorse, and fear. I was hospitalized for dehydration and a mild stroke, spent a week in psychiatric ward, and suffered a number of alcoholic seizures. I lost the trust of my family and friends. They simply could not rely on me for anything. I would stop for a while, but I was always drank again. I certainly identified with our co-founder, Bill W., when he says on page 4 of the big book that old fierce determination to win came back. I would take another drink, and I knew everything was going to be all right. I was going to clean up my act. Everything was going to change. You'll see. It didn't. Nothing changed. I tried so many ways of beating the game. I went to church, took a pledge. I went to a native sweat lodge. I would do something so I would be put in jail. I vowed to stay away from hard liquor. Nothing worked. Then came the pills to stop the shakes and get me off the sauce for a while. One evening during a party at my home, an argument led to fighting, as usual. One of my brothers stabbed me in the back with a knife, and I fell to the floor unconscious. I came to in the hospital, and they told me that my lung had collapsed, and they had a drain in my lung that came out the side of my body. The very next day, some friends came to visit me, bringing a bottle of liquor. I still had that pride. I was still the tough guy. I lay there in bed with tubes draining my lungs and smoked cigarettes and drank liquor. Later in AA, I had the nerve to question step 2 and wonder why I had to be restored to sanity. I can honestly say that nothing worked for me until I joined Alcoholics Anonymous. Eventually, I ended up in a treatment center, and after a 28-day program, I began attending AA meetings on a regular basis. The treatment center introduced me to the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I left there knowing that the only hope for me was the 12 steps. I was told that AA is a spiritual program and that I had better have a higher power. I knew nothing of God or higher powers. I began trying to find one, as I thought that since I am native, maybe I should practice the native traditional ways. Then I thought maybe I should go to church on the reservation. Then I believed that if I went to enough AA meetings and just sat there, I would have a vision and achieve recovery. One day, a member asked me if I believed that there actually was a higher power, and I did believe that there was a God of some sort or another. He told me that that was enough. He said that that belief in attending meetings I would find a higher power of my own understanding. Today I am thankful for that advice. After 3 months in AA, I returned home one evening after a meeting to hear music and laughter playing next door. Some of my drinking buddies were at a party, and I just knew I was going to end up there. I did not want to drink, yet the party was like a magnet. I was full of fear, and I ran across the street to the pay telephone. I called my sponsor, but there was no answer. Panic set in as I ran home. In the house, I went to the bedroom and sat on the side of the bed, looking up, and said these words: "Well, buddy, I guess there's just you and me." Believe it or not, it worked. Those simple words worked. Something happened. A little peace came over me, anxiety left, and I lay down and fell asleep. I slept well that night, the first good sleep in a long time. That feeble request to God worked. I was honest and really wanted God's help. From that day on, I knew that I had found a higher power and that He would help me. Over the next few months, my life slowly began to change as I worked step 1 of the recovery program. I listened to the speakers and began a big book study with an older member. In Micmac folklore, there are little people we call Mujas. They live in the mountains and they often sneak into our homes and play tricks on us, usually at night, so we won't see them. When I noticed that chapter 4 of the big books, We the Agnostics, had appeared to change, I told AA members that the Mujas were fooling around with my big book. You know what? They are still at it today. I now understand that the spiritual malady should be my main concern, and that more faith I have, the fewer problems I will have. Today I have more faith than ever, and my faith grows and my fear lessens. For a guy who has spent years in jails, hospitals, psychiatric wards, and a guy who could not stop drinking, there was only one answer: Alcoholics Anonymous and the 12 steps. I was very fortunate that I was steered in the right direction. A dramatic change has taken place in my life. Soon I hope to celebrate my 2nd anniversary of continuous sobriety. In 2 years, my whole life has changed. Today, I sponsor others and understand the word compassion, and I feel it. I am working on step 8 at the present time, and I just know that more happiness is to come into my life as I trudge the road of happy destiny. That's it for today, you guys. And before I forget, hit that like button. And if you want to, subscribe and hit the little bell to get all the notifications. Until next time, 1 AA time, 1 AA place, and 1 AA channel.